Hey, it's great to see you. Did you get by yesterday all right with your fireworks, your pranks? Am I talking to the wrong crowd? That used to be fun, but I tell you, the noise hurts my ears, and I'm too slow to catch everything. Somebody say, "Oh, wow, that's beautiful." I said, "Where?" It got by me. Well, anyway, we got something kind of strange to do here this morning. You know, we just had this fellow who had an infirmity for 38 years, and Jesus healed him, made him whole. Now, his story isn't over. There are two more things, two more little incidents in his story, and by all rights and reason, that should be what we do this morning. But, you know, there's been so much trash thrown at our flag and our country and our name in recent weeks and months, actually. I think we just need to stop this morning and celebrate something here. 1976 was the 200th anniversary. And at that time, I had to speak at a 4th of July celebration. I got to thinking about it the other day. We need to do that again. And that's what we're going to do this morning. Now, 1976 is 44 years ago. So this is designed so you think about what we're talking about, and then you got to add to that the 44 years that have happened since. And don't say you don't remember. I can see your faces, I know. You were there just like me. So that's what we're going to be doing. And I hope that it makes sense. I hope that there's something here that will give you some encouragement and maybe some direction. I remember sitting in Mr. Davis's American History class in Greenfield, and one day in the 50s, so we got a ways to go yet to the 200th anniversary, but he said, no democratic system has ever lasted 2 centuries and remained strong and influential. Some remain stuck around for a long time, but they lost their influence. They decayed within and were no longer really important. He asked us if we thought the United States would make it from the mid-50s to 1976. Well, of course, a bunch of high school kids, we solved all the world's problems. We discussed everything, didn't know what we were talking about most of the time, but when we got through, the conclusion was that if the United States was going to make it to 1976, they were going to have to hurry because we had problems. You know, problems are not new to us. Boy, the problems they had in the establishing of the country is amazing, and problems are never going to leave us alone. We just figure out how to deal with it, how to handle it. It might help us to look back on those founders of our nation and the problems they faced, see how they handled theirs, and perhaps take a lesson on how to handle ours. Well, we have made it. Now, remember, this is in 1976 we're doing this. Last April 18th and 19th, we went right by the midnight ride of Paul Revere, the battles of Lexington and Concord, and we're ready to sign the Declaration of Independence. Now, this is unprecedented in the history of the world. I can think of no one then with more reason to hold his head proudly high than an American. History, however, has given us some questions. How did the new nation grow? How did it prosper? How is it that we're going to celebrate our nation then? And how do we honor those who founded, formed, and defended her? We can't escape questions like this. Edmund Burke, an 18th century parliamentarian, said, "Every society is a pact between those who are living and those who have lived and those who will live. What we now have is simply the product of the past." We annually gather to celebrate the wisdom of our forefathers. Well, we too are somebody's forefather. And those folks will someday honor our wisdom or pay the price for the lack of it. These are important questions, but notice that they're also personal. The decision you reach affects you and all those unborn who will follow you. Let me suggest how some of the voices from the past have spoken to our questions. James Russell Lowell, 19th century American poet, was asked by a French historian how long he thought the American Republic would stand. And he just came up with an answer quickly: as long as the principles of the founding fathers continue to be dominant. His idea is if we leave those, then we have weakened ourselves. Many important qualities define the founding fathers, but I'm going to suggest 3 to you this morning. We'll see if we can make a point for that. First, there's hope. By 1776, all the speech making and defying Parliament and all that stuff was over. We were in war, and the war was raging all over the United States. Benjamin Franklin had already written, "I cannot but lament the impending calamities. Passion governs, and she never governs wisely." By June of 1776, we had lost our entire Navy at Lake Champlain. One historian wrote later, there was not a single undamaged canoe available to our troops. We had lost at Bunker Hill and Quebec. And most thought at that point that we would lose Long Island, White Plains, New York City, and the forts Washington and Lee. Our troops were scattered along half the length of North America. They had no ammunition, no food, no clothing, no medicines. Our government was unable to procure those things, and if they had been able to get it, they could not have distributed it. Hopeless, isn't it? But the hope we spoke about here as a quality of these men was not a hope that was based on statistics, charts. It's a hope that looks past those things. Thomas Paine expressed this hope when he wrote, "The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." Sometimes a problem troubles. We see this in our Christian lives this way. Those things bother us, but they make us stronger. If hope is going to have any influence in this endeavor, then it will have to be a strengthened hope. John Adams looked back and explained later when he wrote in 1818, the revolution was affected before the war. The revolution was in the hearts and the minds of the people. Our nation was born in fervent hope, as certainly as ever anything was. Thomas Paine again expressed, remember, the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. That this indomitable hope is synonymous with America. You can hear it in our music, you can see it in our literature, you can see it on the faces of people who go to great lengths to get into this country. This hope plays a big role in our history. Now let me suggest an equally important quality. If you have hope, then you must be dedicated to it, and dedication is that quality. It was in December 1776 when Thomas Paine wrote those words that thrilled the heart of every schoolboy who had to memorize them. He said, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he who stands it now deserves the love of man and woman." During these easy times, this dedication was very important because Washington described his army, and I'm afraid it described many armies and many campaigns yet to come, in words that underscore this dedication. He said, "You might have tracked the army from White Marsh to Valley Forge by the blood of their feet." But then it isn't necessary for me to give examples of dedication. You don't need them. You know them personally, in your families, and from among your friends, people who have demonstrated the dedication of these founders. Only let us be sure that the principle is great and worthy. We must not give ourselves to useless matters. But when the principle is great, we must give ourselves completely. There's one more quality to suggest, however, and it's the most important of all. Hope and dedication grow best in the fertile field of faith. If you look upon life as something more than a giant chance, if life is purposeful, directed, non-academic, non-accidental, then what is more natural than to look to the planner for his help? If we look at our history, we'll find abundant evidence of faith in the planning and establishing of our country and government. In 1622, 102 people came. They said, aboard the Mayflower, they said they were in search of a new nation under God. In 1630, waves of Puritans came to this country. They said, to advance the kingdom of the Lord Jesus Christ. And then one of the most amazing things that happened at this time happened before this time. In 1740, there was what we call in this country the Great Awakening. Evangelistic preaching swept New England, swept the whole coast, and it was an amazing thing. There were some great names from that time, and when you bring those names up and think about it, they were only great names because God used them in that particular thing. in that great awakening. It caught the eye of history as well. One historian has suggested that no nation has ever done anything to or for the United States that had an effect anything like that of the Great Awakening. The influence of this preaching was still evident in 1776, and it's still evident in 1976. The Declaration of Independence, according to the scholars, undertaking with a firm reliance on the on the protection of divine providence. And there on the Liberty Bell is emblazoned the words of Leviticus 25:10, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. If you take faith and the evidence of it out of our history dissolves like a dream, as if it were never there. Hope, dedication, and faith, if these were essential to our founding, they still are. In the past several years, crime has nearly exhausted us. Remember, this is 1976 now. I can't remember that we knew anything about crime in those days compared to today. Corruption shocked us. Our attempts to check violence is more than we can handle. Revelation of the stockpiling of weapons of mass destruction by the nations of the world frighten us. The world's increasing potential for destruction and apparent inclination to it are difficult to fathom. The seeming insanity which has gripped the world may well be the strongest and most insidious enemy the U.S. and the free world has ever faced. Hope, dedication, and faith are more important now than they have ever been. I hope that your considerations of these things will lead you in the same way. Let's take the advice of an English philosopher and political leader who in 1770 wrote to his son, "Through the folly and wickedness of the present, you of the rising generation have indeed a dark prospect before you. Your best way will be to gather as fast as you can good stock of the arts and sciences of this country," that is England, "and if you find the night of despotism and wretchedness overwhelms this hemisphere, follow the course of the sun to America, where freedom has already raised her standard and is erecting her throne." Freedom rules. Praise God for what he did. We honor men and women as founders, and of course they were, but they were people who were used of God, and that's why we remember them. Now, I don't know where we're going from here. God may put his hand on one of you, and the deed that you are called upon to perform may be a key to what's coming for us in the future. We don't know. But we know the thing is in his hands, which means, of course, that God can bless it marvelously, or he can erase it. We've gone through this coronavirus thing. Pardon me. I speak as if it were over, and I guess it isn't. But the part that we've already gone through has been from God, a test for the church. We must not fail that test. Ask God, what is it? What is it, Lord, that you need from me? some wit suggested that the churches were closed during this time because God said, "You're not worshiping me the way you ought anyway." So I just shut you down for a while. And that was treated as a joke. I found it hard to laugh at it. It seems too much easy possibility there. Anyway, I hope you have had a lovely 4th of July, that you've found reason to celebrate, that you've found reason to have your spirits lifted somewhat. I hope you didn't watch any news yesterday. If you want to raise your spirits, people, you got to find some other way to do it. I know we have to get back to the reality that's around us, but let's don't forget the past. Let's don't forget what has been done here. When historians said people who forget the past are destined to repeat it. We must gain from it, glean from it, and be stronger because of it. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for showing up. I'll tell you, your faces, just, I wish I could come back here and give you a hug. Ron first, yeah. God bless you. Larry, let's sing a song, shall we?